Madam, I would be sharing my
Professor?
presentation.
Oh, you're sharing it, sir? Okay, sir.
Yeah, I'll be sharing my presentation.
Okay, okay. Let me tell you, sharing. So you can start sharing the presentation, sir. Um, uh, Good
Yes,
morning,
I'll
all of
start
you.
sharing.
Yes, sir. Good morning, all of you. Our next speaker is Dr. Rama Kumagiri, sir. He is professor and head of Electronics and Communication Engineering Department, and uh, from Bennett University, Noida. And has rich knowledge in this field, and he'll be talking about biomedical devices. Let us hear from him.
Madam, just one. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, very clearly.
Okay, sure. Great. So just 1 minute. Let me. Yes. Thank you a lot for your kind words. And do we have some time or we have to start?
We can start right away, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I request all the participants to listen carefully because the questions will be taken from every speaker. And finally, you will be giving the test. As you all know, the rules that you have to score some marks for getting your certificates. And also, the attendance is mandatory. I request all of you to listen carefully to every speaker. Thank you.
So good morning, all. Um, Thanks a lot for giving me an opportunity, and also let me congratulate the entire team for organizing such a nice and timely event, which focuses on biomedical sensors and more on the MEMS. And my talk in today's talk, I am going to take up a few examples, or rather, I'll take one example that we have done in our during as a part of our work. But before building that, I would be using uh, some of my time to build the base up. So I would be going from as pretty small detail as you look from the definition of biomems, and then we will make a comparison of biomems. Then we will take up certain examples and then challenges, and then in the inaugural talk, professor has made a they have shown a very interesting aspects, on the selectivity, or rather the sensor was such a hit because of the fact that they have concentrated on a on very important performance parameters. So we'll be looking up at those performance parameters. And one of the interesting aspects of MEMS is that to make sure that the device has a certain interface, and not that all the sensors all the sensors would have certain sensing and actuating mechanisms, and being this FTP is rather organized by the electronics wing. So I would be spending certain time on looking up at various sensing and actuating mechanisms, and then different devices using sensing mechanisms. Then I would take up an example of a biosensor that is designed, fabricated, and tested as a proof of concept using magnetic microcoils. Then I would summarize the talk. So when we look up at the biosensors, when we look up at the biosensors, when and define a biosensor from a systematic aspect, biomems usually contains sensors, actuators, mechanical structures, and electronics. And such systems are being developed as diagnostic and analytical devices. From a component point or a component aspect, a biomems is the research of microfabricated MEMS device for biological applications. So one important point here is that you take a system aspect or a component aspect. Apparently, the stress is on the usage for the biomedical applications. This is where it makes the MEMS standing out from biomems standing out from the other MEMS. Or put in a nutshell, MEMS technology is an engineering solution for biomedical problems. So we have to look out and come up with an aspect of rather thinking that biomems is something to be developed for MEMS. Rather, one should be using MEMS technology to provide solutions for biomedical problems. So when we compare MEMS versus biomems, MEMS use micro-sized components like sensors, transducers, actuators, and electronic devices to sense. That means to smell, feel, see, hear, taste. And what biomems do is that biomems are MEMS that have biological or biomedical functions or applications. So the aspect of the sensor or a transducer or an actuator is to make sure that there are certain biomedical functions that are being seen. And one of the biggest examples that we have seen in biomedical sensors, and one of the primitive things is a MEMS inertial sensor. So that means we are looking up at the MEMS sensor. This is used for airbag deployment in cars and also used in rate responsive pacemaker. So that means the initial sensor has at least, two applications. One in a purely mechanical aspect, that means with cars, the other one in a life-saving aspect. So now once the MEMS sensor is used, initial sensor is used in pacemakers, it becomes a biomem sensor. So retina array. So there are many ways. There are many things that are seen with retina arrays. We'll look up at very briefly. Contains a few set of cameras and a few set of electronics to detect. Had it been used to picture something, then it is not a biomedical sensor. But had it been used in a retinal array, it becomes a biomem. And micropump. For insulin, there are micropumps that are required to pump certain uh, for flow control and used for biomedical applications. It is a biomems, and if you use for a non-biology application, it's a MEMS. So when we look up at MEMS and biomems, the biomems have a bigger perspective of being implemented with a biomedical application as target. And there are few other important aspects. Even though biomems has all the aspects that are coming from MEMS, that means when I say that MEMS silicon based materials, biomems are also, some of them are also based on silicon based materials. Some of them have electrical and mechanical interface, and active component is a moving part in the micro machining system. So all these are also applicable for MEMS and also for biomems. But apart from the properties or the requirements of MEMS, some of the biomems also have processes that are IC, means integrated circuit incompatible processes. That means they use glasses, they use polymers, they use metals. That is so because most of the biomedical reactions do require materials which are not primarily used in the silicon industry. And biomems also integrates transducers like biomolecular and physical processes like electrical, mechanical, optical, etc. There can be more than one processes. And biomems are most of the times based on microfluidic driving forces. The opening talk is a classic example of using microfluidic forces to achieve quite a few functionalities. So when we look up at MEMS and biomems, there is a different thinking perspective between MEMS to biomems. And one of the bottlenecks in biomems is that maybe we should leave the language or the professional barriers and talk to the doctors or biologists a bit more. And now I would like to make a comparison, or rather a complete detailing of what a biomems sensor system looks like. There is something called as an effector. Effector means that there is a reaction that is happening, or there is a signal that we are going to get, that may be because of some physical property changes or chemical property changes or magnetic property changes or whatever that it may be. And this effector is put on an active surface area. And once the effector affects on the active surface area, so that means that there is a surface. The surface is predominantly coated or includes a certain reactant already, and we put an effector. That means uh, an object that needs to be detected, which affects the active surface by affecting physically or chemically, magnetically, or in whatever possible that way it may be. And that effect is then converted, changes its form to a transducer. So this is what we call as a sensor. And the transducer gives a signal that most of the times we are interested in looking up at electrical signal like a charge, a current, a voltage, something of that sort. And then such a signal is amplified, then filtered for its noises. Then we do some analog to digital conversion, certain aspects. And that means you can call that as some signal processing aspects. If it is included with the sensor, you call that as an integrated sensor. So the first part is that up to transducer, that means that changing one form of signal to the other form of signal is taken care by the sensor. Then amplification or the adding the electrical signal processing capabilities is seen as an integrated sensor. Then you add a few more functionalities like data storage and process the data and so on and so forth. This is called as a smart sensor. And then once the data is processed and the data is processed and stored and data processing is being done, then the data is given to the output to a control system to take certain actions. Once that is done, we call that system as a sensor system. Now one interesting aspect is that these particular different boxes do have to be put in place in properly to have a sensor system. And there is a requirement of people who act upon on how to do with amplification, filtering, and analog to digital and these aspects, because most of the signals in biomedical applications have a very weak or very small signals. The amplitudes are very small and they are seen in they are prone in a very noisy environment. For example, the best magnetic amplitudes that one can get for ECG are about a few less than or around 10 millivolts. And if you look up at thermal noise that is prevalent, that is going to be kT by Q, which is approximately 25 millivolts. So your noise is always much larger than your signal. So that means that there is a stringent requirement for low noise amplifiers, or rather there is a stringent requirement to remove noises, and also there is a requirement for a low noise amplifier. So that means the electronic design is there very exciting. So when we look up at a basic sensor system put in a different perspective, there is a sensor. So that means I'm using the sensors along with a human body where there is a primary sensing element, and then there is an integrated sensor, and a smart sensor, and then a sensor system. So there are different aspects than one wishes to measure. The different aspects can be inclusive of your electric current or radiation or applied energy, whatever that may be. And the sensor sometimes also requires a calibration signal, and there might be a requirement to do a variable conversion. Most of the times charge is being found out and we have to change that to electric field or vice versa. And there is also a requirement to power lot of sensors and lot of circuits that do on with. So there is a requirement for power sources. So that means there is a requirement for power management units. There is a requirement of memory, because one might want to store the data, and there might be a requirement of data transition, because most of the times now we are also speaking about Internet of Things, and there is a certain amount of control and feedback required. So you can look up at that. The basic biosensor system, when when it is looked in totality, is a very complex instrument where electronics, mechanical aspects of mechanical engineering, and the aspects of biomedical engineering are required. And there are a few fields in biosensors, and some of them called as micro total analysis systems, or some of them are called as lab on chip, and there are biomems. So each and every, for example, if I look up at micro total analysis system, it contains microreactors, it contains arrays, it contains point of care diagnostic chips, it contains miniaturized biosensors. And when when we look up at biomems, it contains microneedles, implantable microneedles, organ on a chip, microfluidic cell, uh, polymerase chain reaction chips, microarrays, point of care chips. And when we look up at lab on chips, lab on chip contains microreactors, microarrays, point of care diagnostics, PCR chips, organ on a chip, microfluidic cell. So that means there is a huge uh, overlap between various aspects of biomems of biosensors. Let it be called as biomems, or let it call as lab on chip, or let it be called as micro total analysis system. When we look up at biomems applications, there is a research for possible applications in variety of areas, and they have already led to multiple application in detection, analysis, diagnosis, therapeutics, drug delivery, cell culture, to name a few. Right now, I would take a few examples that have been already taken that are already existing in literature, and there are also certain products that are available. First example is that a biomems system applicable to diabetics. I have taken this example because the insulin pump and automated glucose, a micro sensor based for glucose monitoring is a commonly seen devices, or rather, it is fast becoming a household device in many places. So there is an external pump A that is connected to a computer, and there is a soft cannula to deliver the insulin, and there is an interstitial glucose sensor, and there is a wireless radio device to communicate with the computer. So there are essentially four parts in the biomems system. Now, when I look up at the glucose sensor, can pretty much take the blood sample through a micro needle, and then it puts back into a reactor. Then what the reactor does is that there is a reaction that happens to find out the amount of insulin, and then there is a decision that to be made. So now, if we look up at the interstitial glucose sensor, what it does is that it can only measure the amount of, or it can only give me the reaction, and then I have a chemical reaction or whatever that the glucose is measured. It can only limit itself to that. Now, when we look up at how this system monitors itself, the sensor C continuously measures. Continuously means that not at every second or every microsecond, but at a designated interval, measures glucose levels in the interstitial fluid. So this interstitial fluid means that the fluid that is present between body tissues. Now, there is a wireless radio D that transmits the real-time measurements from the sensor to the computer A. So you can see that if I want to transmit some signal using wireless, I shall have a analog to digital conversion already made and present along with the sensor. Now, what the computer A does, it receives the data, and then it looks up at the stored data by looking up at is some dose of insulin required or not. If there is a dose of insulin that is required, then the pump A administers the dose through a small micro pump that is connected to cannula. Uh, that is connected to cannula, and then the micropump would be administering the dose through the subject. So there is a micropump required for insulin, and of course there is a significant amount of electronics that is required to complete this task. The second example is a artificial retinal prosthesis. This is again an example, right? So what you see here is that we are looking up at a subject who is visually impaired, and mostly the optic nerve system might have been got damaged. So what is done is that there is a receiver. That means something like, you can think a receiver, meaning that there would be a few lenses that would focus on a particular object, and there is a retina implant where there is a microelectrode array, and there are certain electronics that are associated, that are implanted into the retina, and there is a array of electrodes that are connected to the at the back for photoreceptors, and these photoreceptor cells cells are connected to the human brain. Now what they do is that uh, they first look in the working is in such a complex way that the artificial retina is the heart of the system. So then electrode is directly placed directly on the retina at the back of the eye, and this array duplicates the task of a photoreceptor cell in the retina. So what that means is that there are essentially certain electronic signals that we are going to look up at. And how one generate the electronic signals is that there is a camera in one of the eyeglasses, and there is a microprocessor or a transmitter where the subject wears on a belt, and what it does is that the camera recordings are given or transmitted to the microprocessor through wireless, and then a certain amount of signal processing is being done, like to identify certain subjects that or objects or letters, whatever that is the system is trained for. Then once the objects are detected, electrical impulses are given back to the electrode array. So this electrode array then sends some impulses to the retinal neurons through the optic nerve. Then the patient sees, that means the patient can flashes of light can be processed by brain to make the equivalent of low resolution images. Then a third example is a minimally invasive surgery. The system is called as a Da Vinci system. What this does is that a surgeon is operated from a seated position at a console with a large monitor. So that means the patient or the subject is in one particular operation theater, and the doctor sits in his office. Let us call that as an office, and the surgeon simply moves hands to reposition the instruments or the camera. So what that means is this is something like better than a joystick array. I don't simply say that this is like a joystick array, but there are certain instruments that panels where the surgeon can move, where the surgeon can make a cut, make a stitching, or he, can observe, and they were able to achieve 7 degrees of motion, and the surgeon can perform an operation. But the problem here with such a first generation system is that there is no sense of touch. This is called as a haptic sense, and there is no sense of touch. So what the minimally invasive surgery system has been implemented is that a pneumatic balloon based haptic feedback system is placed where each point has a transducer. So that means the transducers were designed in such a way that the doctor feels a pressure coming back from the system. So that means once a surgical blade or an instrument touches the organ, certain amount of pressure is amount of pressure is measured, and that pressure is transmitted back to the surgeon who wears some kind of a specially designed tissue with a grasper, and the force is translated proportional to pressure that are sent to a joystick in surgeon's hand, and the surgeon feels the change in pressure and adjusts as it is required. And this system is developed by Center of Advanced Surgical and Interventional Technologies at UCLA, which has been in use for a few years at least. Then the other aspect is as a diagnostic tool, which use chemical sensor arrays for disease identification to gather biomedical information to prescribe appropriate drugs for personalized medicine and antibody identification. This is just to name a few. What this cartoon on this particular site tells me is that these these are essentially some micro these are some essentially micro cantilevers. Whenever there is a foreign material that is present, let us say in the blood, which has a different either electrical charge behavior or which has a separate mass, then they would be reacting with the chemical that is put back on the cantilever, and there would be an increase in the mass. So as a result, what happens is that the cantilevers are going to bend down. Then the bending can either be measured using optical signals, or the bending can be used by measuring the change in the capacitance. So there is a way of measuring the signals by using using two modes, one by optical measurements or by electrical measurements. And so that means one shall be able to detect certain present of certain pathogens or certain chemicals or certain impurities present in a human body. The next aspect is this is about drug delivery using microneedles. These microneedles are very small in size. The entire tip length is about 200 micrometer, and essentially using single crystalline silicon, and they are used a bulk micro machining process. Higher order planes are exposed, and then the holes are drilled using a laser. And these are pretty much required to administer drugs in an example that we have seen while drug administration that we have seen for the insulin. And when we look into the biomedical applications do require biochips, where one can do proteometrics, diagnostics, drug delivery, blood pressure sensing, genetic analysis, to name a few. Some of the drug delivery platforms that include a certain CMOS integrated circuitry, and there are flow channels. We have seen very classic and very good examples of flow channels in the uh, initial session, and there are certain electrodes that can be used to conduct, that means to make or stop blood flow through the channels. So that is essentially done using by controlling some charge on the by controlling some plates on a micro pump, or rather by controlling some valves on the micro pump. And there are microblades designed using chemical etching, which can be used for delicate microsurgeries. And micro needles are fabricated in a similar fabrication as micro needles, meaning that they are bulk micro machined. Then the higher order planes are exposed. Then, as per the requirement, they are not really laser drilled, but certain amount of material is evaporated by using focused lasers. And when we look up at why there is a huge uh, attention towards a biochip, there is there are quite a few projects that are running on for human genome project, and like understanding the behavior of a human genome or human DNA, so that some diseases can be perfectly there can be a cure for diseases, or medicines can be invented for. And in order to understand that, the bioinformatic revolution is what is essentially leading the research in biomems. So when we look up at a biochip, biochips are devices which allow super high speed, high sensitive analysis of biologically active DNAs, proteins, cells that are highly integrated on glass, silicon, or polymer substrates. Now we will ask ourselves why there is a requirement for biochip. When we are a lab on a chip, when we look up at the earlier days, for example, even now take an example of some of the simple medical tests. It takes about 2 to 3 hours to get a medical result from a medical test. Point number one, and the subject is supposed to go from his home to whatever place that it may be to give the sample, and that is point number one. Point number two is that there are quite a few remote places where it becomes impractical for the health governing agencies to set up labs and to administer health in the region. That is because of the fact that the number of qualified doctors whole across the globe is not that huge. And the second case is that there are so many diseases and there are so many treatments that are that are being seen day to day. So in the presence, if there is a biochip, one can pretty much administer a standard process and rather train some medical staff or paramedical staff where they can be trained to carry certain amount of tests, and the test information can be then processed and sent via your wireless communication modes so that the diseases can be detected. So that means this opens a wide window of controlling diseases, maybe rather controlling diseases, and also administering or rather giving a proper health guidance. When we look up at biosensors and systems, there is a small difference between biosensor and biochip. Biosensor is a sensor which can be used to detect some biological phenomena. When we look up at the biochips, there are microchip arrays, there are lab on chips, and microchip arrays have DNA chip, protein on chip, cell chip, carbohydrate chip, aptamer chip, and so on and so forth. And essentially, all these systems have one common platform, that is MEMS. So when looking to a functional genomics, what generally people would like to do is that the DNA chip allows to check gene expressions or mutations by adhering highly integrated genome DNA on its substrate. So that means that one can study the patterns or lack of pattern or mutations that are causing because of due to a DNA. And what proteins chips do is that these chips that have ligands and proteins, they can react with specific protein on its surface. So there is a chemical reaction that is going to take place in this particular system. That once, if we consider this particular example, there is a substrate which is uh, which is uh, which is coated with gold electrode. On the gold electrode, there are some surface molecules, and these surface molecules, they have a capturing antibody. Now what happens is that when a certain amount of serum is put on the surface, the antibodies which are associated with a target protein, using the target protein, they catch the antibody. Now what happens is that if somebody is going to find a way, or rather if there is a possibility of a chemical reaction, or if there is a possibility of a change in the charge, then the antibodies can be detected. That is one way of looking for applications. The other way is that one can separate the proteins, and they can be checked for their requirements, and they can be quantitatively analyzed on the chip so that if there is a disease, that can be detected. And what these protein on chips can do is that rather there can be one microchannel where the microchannel would keep, or rather people call that as a reservoir, and through different microchannels, this would send the same serum to different cells in the different bloods where different reactions can take place. The reactions then can be observed using appropriate methods, so that the disease diagnostics can be done in a very quickly. Do you have to give a couple of minutes for any questions that might be present at this time? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Do you have to yes, do you have to take any
Yeah.
questions at this point in time, or I can proceed further?
Hello, sir. I have one
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Sir, now usually when we go to the lab, current situation or current scenario,
Huh.
we are taking a bit of some 10 ml or whatever it is.
Huh.
Then test and all those things it time. Can we
Huh.
have multiple microscans so that I can find out all the possible values or a possible a fraction of seconds or a few minutes? Now, how many channels it is allowing? Current scenario, the lab on chip or whatever we calling it, how many parameters it is able to check it now?
As far as I know, there are arrays for 4x4. That means 16 different things can be possible.
Okay.
Actually, most of the times what happens is that it's not that every deceit would be should be done in one shot. There are certain classifications that are seen, let us say, for example, related to fever kind of things. Should I look up at different kind of fever? That is one set of tests, because each test requires a different chemical reaction.
I think
So
it's a basic. Yeah.
yes,
I think it's basically a protein based, right? Whatever the MEMS, biomems or biosensor, what they are
yes,
in is mainly, yeah. So each protein will act with a particular
yes,
antigen or that particular one.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
With when I am sending it, so whatever the blood I am given it, so it will react with particular protein. So if the disease is there, it will detect. That means
Yes.
I should have multiple sensors or multiple chips where it has to detect a particular protein or a particular disease. I cannot have everything in one place, right?
Yes, you cannot have you cannot, you can have some things in a place, because one of the information that I had is that when there is a testing that happens, people would separate the blood for a particular purpose. It's not that every thing would be going with the same test. To answer your question, let us say if somebody is going to detect a certain kind of proteins, that certain kind of proteins to be extracted. For that, there is a pre-processing where they would add a different chemical. So, depending upon what is the pre-processing that is required to get a particular test, so then that particular serum would be given. That serum would be used to detect a certain thing. So, if that pre-separation tests are different, that means that I shall have that many number of chips to do different classes of diseases. So it might be possible to detect a certain class of disease, but not all classes of diseases with such a huge array. That may not be practical.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So what lab on a chip pretty much does is that lab on a chip uses microfabrication techniques where micro nano fluidic techniques are applied, and that would include some dilution, some mixing, some reaction, meaning that if I'm looking up at a target protein, as you have rightly pointed out, So there is a certain reaction, that a pre-reaction that has to be taken done before, and there shall be a certain separation of the sample which should be taken, which should be done for. And these kind of separations and reactions, there are only, to my best of knowledge, there are to a certain extent that are possible, but not every separation can be possible. Those separations are still done in a lab. But the advantages of lab on chip or these separations is that it is simply adding a few chemicals, then collect the serum and put it on the lab on the chip. So what lab on the chip does is that it miniaturizes, and it can automation. It can detect lot of it can detect more than one disease in one shot, or presence or absence of disease in one shot. It can also quantify the amount of disease, and they can also and the other case is that because there is a certain signal, quantized signal that comes in, this provides a benefit of reproducibility and quality. In good old days, what people used to look out is that the chemical, let us say if there is a chemical reaction that happens, the chemical reaction, the shade of the color or certain concentration changes have been found manually, and which also requires a huge amount of chemicals plus a huge amount of bloods. But now going to the benefits of lab on a chip, it requires blood and chemicals in microliters, or at best a few milliliters. So when we look up at lab on a chip, what lab on a chip has given us is that it opened the doors for drug delivery, while automated drug delivery for treatments. And there is a possibility of high automation, and as I have already pointed out, the low sample and reagent volumes or chemical volumes to be very small, it's required to be very small, and they are possible to integrate with the different systems, and they can also be used for uh, drug delivery. And the other important aspect is that these lab on chip systems are disposable. So when we look up at BioMEMS applications and challenges, we will look up at these systems into two different aspects: one, chips for research and chips for diagnosis. The applications include various platforms, like it can various platforms means that detecting quite a few different diseases. They require different people to work on with. So this is a interdisciplinary research. Like you need chemists, you need electronics engineer, you need a few doctors, and there are huge amounts of data that are required. And the research is going to happen by the choice of the researcher. But the challenge here is that there are ethical issues. Any invasive test, that means if I have to collect a blood, or if I have to collect a serum from an animal, from any animal or any human beings are even going to be seen at a later point in time, there are huge ethical concerns that needs to be validated and that needs a clearance. So this is a huge challenge this is a challenge. And the other challenge is that interdisciplinary research, it may be easy to say that we can work as a team in doctor, engineer, and various disciplines, but it is very difficult to understand the basics in the field that we are looking up, that we are of interest. For example, for an engineer, it is not that easy to understand the biomedical reactions. For a doctor, it may not be easy for him to understand the electronics or mechanical aspects. When we look for chips for diagnosis, there can be various products, but the results should be the same. So that means that this is a challenge of repeatability. Using method A or method B, or that means system A or system B or system C, the result should be pretty much the same. So there is a challenge of unification of systems. Then reliability, sensitivity, and accuracy. The system should be reliable, and the system should be sensitive enough, and accuracy meaning that there shall not be huge variations from the manufacturer when they are between different batches. It can be that I buy a certain set of equipment today, and maybe after a few months, it is required to have certain usable parts, and the reusable parts should not be having a huge variation. And the challenge also here is that the system should be simple and robust to use. That means even a layman should be able to use it without much of a difference. And these are there are certain restrictions given by laws and regulations, and the application should be designed as per the laws and the regulations. So the challenge here would be the time to market can be very long, and this is one of the main reasons why most of the biomem systems mainly stop at research level. Then the next aspect is about the performance parameters. There are a few. I have already introduced a few things: reliability, sensitivity, and accuracy. We will look up it into what these actually mean. The performance parameters are characterized in two ways. One is sensitivity, the cross sensitivity and crosstalk, signal to noise ratio and drift. What is sensitivity mean? Sensitivity means that this sensitivity is essentially given to the least. It can be associated to least count. The sensitivity means that what is the level difference that I can achieve to quantify uh, a reaction or to quantify a particular disease. Cross sensitivity or crosstalk, there can be more than one. Uh, there can be more than one effect. How these two effects interfere with each other. Signal to noise ratio, what is the noise present in the system and what is the signal present in the system. How do I differentiate the signal, that means the useful signal, and how can I differentiate that? And a drift meaning that does the signal to noise ratio changes with respect to time. Resolution, again linked to sensitivity, but resolution tells in that what is the minimum, what are the levels, what is the minimum separation that I can achieve between two levels. Span or a range, this is also called as a bandwidth. What is the amount of minimum quantity that I can detect, and what is the maximum quantity that I can detect. And then going to the dynamic range, or it is also called as gain and dynamic error. When the system is being operated, from what level of what is the minimum level and what is the maximum level the system can detect it. Selectivity, if there are more than one system that is required to be detected, how one signal is oppressed compared to the other. Hysteresis, meaning that measuring from minimum to maximum and maximum to minimum, what kind of variation that one get. Precision, how accurately accuracy means that how closely I can detect. Precision means that how close my detection is to, and what is the variance that is going to come from. Calibration, what is the amount, how frequently the system needs to be set for its zero. So one of the important examples is cross sensitivity and crosstalk. One of the limitations that comes from many sensors is cross sensitivity and crosstalk, and this can be pretty much seen in most of the sensors where there is a alcohol or esters detection that is included in. And the cross sensitivity means that the influence of one measurand on the sensitivity of the sensor for another measurand. For example, let us say somebody wants to detect the levels of ethyl alcohol. Let us say the system contains both methyl and ethyl alcohol. What is the effect of methyl alcohol on the detection of ethyl alcohol and vice versa? Crosstalk is something a bit different, that is more associated with the systems where the electromagnetic noise transmitted between leads or circuits in close proximity to each other. For example, we will look up at selectivity. Selectivity is the ability of a sensor to measure only one parameter. For example, in the case of chemical sensors, it needs to measure only one chemical species. Because of, for example, I'll take an example of electric nose and electronic nose and electronic tongue. There is a lack of perfect selectivity, let's say, perfect selectivity. So there are arrays. Most of the times they are implemented in arrays. So for example, when we look up at electronic nose, for example, say that a certain gas needs to be detected. And how these gas sensors do work is that the sensitivity of a certain gas sensor to different gases depends upon choice of the catalyst that performs the reaction and the material and the operating temperature. And if somebody combines several different gas sensors into a sensor array, then complex gas mixtures can be analyzed. But the limitation is coming from the selectivity of the sensors, because qualitative and quantitative analysis can be performed using, it is not easy, but there can be certain pattern recognition techniques that can be used in. So one can see that one end of the selectivity pretty much requires certain amount of signal analytics. So a combination of multiple gas sensors and signal analysis using pattern recognition techniques is used is the concept behind electronic nose and tongue. And there are certain applications that are already seen. Estimate quality estimation of ground meat, identification of different paper qualities. Screening of vegetables is done, and also there is a electronic nose from IIT Bombay where they can detect certain amount of chemicals, which cause some explosions. The other important aspect of MEMS sensors are acuting and sense mechanism. So when we look up at transducers, sensors, and actuators, transducer is a device which converts one form of energy to the other. Sensor is a device that can detect or measure a physical property. Actuator converts electrical input to a physical input. So the transducers, sensors, and actuators form the subset of transducers. An example of a transducer is a piezoelectric device. Sensor is a device which converts a physical input parameter to electrical output signal, for example, force to voltage. Actuator is a device which takes the electrical input signal and converts that to a physical parameter output, for example, voltage conversion to force. So when we look up at electrostatic excitation, electrostatic excitation utilizes either attractive or repulsive Coulomb forces between electrically charged bodies. And this principle is most widely used in MEMS micro actuators. So where a pair of electrodes with a tiny separation are implemented in various shapes and orientations by micromachining techniques. And this structure is modeled as a simple parallel plate capacitor. Magnetic excitation often involves permanent magnets and electromagnetic coils. And magnetic excitation enables large forces and deflections with low power consumption. Magnetic excitation is used in pumps, valves, mixers, mirrors, switches, and to separate certain amount of materials which are charged. And magnetic excitation is related to magnetic sensing, where magnetic fields are required to produce the sensing action. The second, one of the most importantly used techniques is sensor-based techniques is piezoelectric effect, where a crystal processing a certain symmetry is not piezoelectric due to dipoles. But what happens is that within a primitive cell, they actually cancel out. So as a result, there is no net polarization. And when there is an externally applied stress, they don't alter the crystal symmetry. So what happens here is that, oh my God, okay. What happens here is that when there is a unit cell that has a net dipole, and when there is a stress that is applied, the stress causes the system to elongate in a particular or a preferred direction, and as a result, there is a change in the dipole moment, and this is the origin of the piezoelectric effect. The next case is piezoresistive effect. This effect is due to change in dimensions. What happens is that, for example, if I consider a resistor whose length is L and thickness is T, and the resistance of the resistor is given rho L by A, where rho is the resistivity of the material. When there is a stress applied, the dimensions are increased, let us say by delta L, delta W, delta T. Then the resistivity would become, because it is a property of the dimensions, there is a change in resistivity. Now, applying a certain voltage or letting by passing a current, I can always and measuring the voltage, change in the voltage or pass current through the resistor, one can say that there is a change in the signal because there is a change in the signal. Increasing the resistance reduces the current flow through the circuit, or vice versa, increasing the resistance can also be seen as an increase in the voltage drop across the resistor. Generally, bridge-based sensors are like Vision bridge or some simple array bridges are used to detect signals from the piezoresistive effect. So let me go back. Yeah. The next effect is thermal excitation. What happens is that in thermal, there is the property called thermal expansion or contraction is a property based on the thermal based on the surrounding temperature. So they can be expandable or they can be shrinkable. And what happens is that one can heat them by passing a current through an embedded resistor, or they can also excite by optical excitation called as a optothermal effect. So the system can be used to the system can be excited using the temperature differences. So when we look up it in the performance comparison of major actuators, there are electrostatics which result in a displacement of 0.1 to 30 micrometer. So one can look up at that. If the displacement required is large, then somebody can go with magnetic, and if there are small displacements, then one can go with electrostatic. And the other case is that when if somebody requires a large uh, when somebody requires a high speed device, then the magnetic devices are generally the preferred devices, and they also require a small current. The magnetic devices are based on current principles. So this is one of the difficulties in magnetic based sensors, because generating large currents may not be a possibility. But the electrostatic devices, one can apply pretty large, one can apply a voltage, and applications of voltage or voltage based biasing schemes are much easier than current based biasing schemes. So even though the magnetic sensors can give a large displacement and can give a decent enough output force, but because there needs to be bias using current, there are certain limitations that they come from. So when we compare various excitation methods, electrostatic excitation is advanced. It's very famous because it is due to the simplicity of the materials and fast excitation response. Electrostatic methods are used. They are simple to do, but there is a trade-off between magnitude and force displacement. And most of the times, the electrostatic excitation is based on capacitive methods. So there are certain aspects called as pull-in limitation, where a parallel plate capacitor plates can be touching with each other. Piezoelectric excitation, they are fast. They have a fast response, and they can achieve very large displacements. But the disadvantage is that it requires a complex material preparation, and they have a degraded performance at low frequencies, and there is an aging factor that also comes in. Thermal excitation, they can achieve very large displacements. It can be angular or linear. They are moderately fast because heating and cooling takes a certain amount of time. And the biggest disadvantage is that they require very large power, because the heating or cooling needs to be done using Joule heating or certain cooling techniques. And the other issue is that they are very sensitive to environmental changes. The magnetic excitation is capable of generating large angular displacements, and there is a possibility of using very strong magnetic fields as a force bias. But the problem is there are moderately complex to complex processes, and they have a difficulty to form on-chip systems because they require very exotic materials, and most of these exotic materials are not compatible with the CMOS processing or MEMS processing. And the other aspect is that the magnetic linking happens through the most of the times the magnetic linking happens through mutual inductance, and thus getting high efficient solenoid is not as easy it is not easy, right? And there are, even though there are certain limitations, engineers have done there are certain examples of piezoelectric applications. One is a cochlear implant. There is a active this is a active middle ear implant based on the piezoelectric thin film cantilevers. What happens is that when somebody speaks, uh, there is a membrane, and there is an infrared LED, and the infrared LED is going to sense the change in the position because of the membrane vibrations and converts that into an electrical signal, and then the signal is then attached to auditory bones, where the auditory bones would be uh, would be passing the information in for the further processing by brain. And there are quite a few mechatronic systems where with medical application where the prosthetics have been seen, where arms, legs, and other body parts have been replaced. This is an example of a human. I mean, this is a human. There are certain examples where the gesture-based learning is being put into practice. All these things, they have happened because of few important sensors. The first set of sensors are tactile sensors, where polymer based these are polymer based piezoelectric sensors. What happens is that there is a top electrode, there is a bottom electrode, and the top electrode is essentially connected to ground, so that means the somebody is going to touch it. The bottom electrode is connected to a simple circuitry. Whenever there is a pressure, there is a due to piezoelectric effect, there is a change in the voltage. There is a the change in the voltage causes a change in the voltage on the MOSFET, and as a result, what happens is that there is a change in the current that flows through the MOSFET, and this particular MOSFET, and that causes a change in the bias of this particular MOSFET, and that changes that gives a particular voltage signal, and the voltage signal is seen, or the amount of output voltage is seen as the amount of pressure that is applied on the electrode sensor. There are a few flow sensors where piezoelectric based flow sensors. What happens out is that there is a flow that is possible, and if there is a pressure that happens out, the diaphragm is going to bend. As a result, the open orifice, the cross section of orifice that is open is going to change, so that causes the flow to be controlled. So one can pretty much control the entire flow that is entire flow that is happening through a microchannel. So when we look up at various sensing methods for a comparison, piezoresistive, I'm taking three things: piezoresistive, capacitive, and electromagnetic. Piezoresistive is very simple for fabrication. Capacitive is a simple mechanical structure. Electromagnetic structures, the complexity varies. I mean, it can be medium complex to extremely complex. Piezoresistive have low cost, and capacitive also give low cost, and electromagnetic are expensive because they have a complex packaging. Piezoresistive can be voltage or current driven. Capacitive is voltage driven, and electromagnetic is current driven. So the current driven technologies are a bit difficult to manage because one has to have a constant current source that flows for the given duration of the time. And piezoresistive advantage is that simple measurement circuits, and capacitive requires certain electronic circuits which are essentially from bridges and above, and electromagnetics are can be used as simple control circuits. The other disadvantage is low output impedance for piezoresistive, and capacitive are susceptible to electromagnetic interferences, and and capacitive also that means susceptible to environmental effects, and electromagnetic effects are also effective to environmental effects and also any other electronic gadgets that are present between. The piezoresistive has a high temperature dependence. Both capacitive and electromagnetic are low depending on temperature. Piezoresistive has a small sensitivity, and capacitive has sensors have a medium sensitivity, but they can have a large dynamic range. And electromagnetic sensors have a sensitivity proportional to magnetic field, so that means that the amount of that current flows through. The piezoresistive are insensitive to parasitic resistances. The capacitive are sensitive to parasitic capacitances, and electromagnetic are insensitive to parasitic inductances. And the circuit configuration that is required for piezoresistive is open loop. Capacitive is either open loop or closed loop. Electromagnetic is either open loop or closed loop. And while coming back with the power consumption, piezoresistive and electromagnetic give medium power consumption, and capacitive has a low power consumption. So one interesting way to implement a tensile device is being shown here. So what is that one having is that there is a comb on either side, and and there is a plate, let us call a plate, which is coated with a certain protein, and the protein has a certain mass. So then what happens is that there would be like these two capacitors are electrostatically actuated, so that means the plates are pulled in, so that means there is a stretching that happens. So what happens is that the stretching is then studied by using fluorescent studies. So then one can see what would be the stretching, what would be the force applied on the stretching on the protein coating, and as a result the concentration of the protein coating and the thickness of the protein coating would tell the amount of stretching that a particular protein can be stretched for. And this is a widely used principle in proteinometric sensors. The other interesting sensors are potentiometric techniques, which have gathered wide attention because this lets electroanalytical methods to be combined with chemical methods. So there are direct called as direct potentiometries. It is based on pH and ions. These are pH sensors and ion selective probes. And indirect potentiometry based on gas sensors or enzymes, and these two let the potentiometric sensors to be minimized. What happens in dielectric potentiometric sensors is that this is an example is a pH sensor. It contains an electrode which is called as an indicator and a reference. For example, this has been put in a tube, and then what happens is that when a chemical reaction happens, there is a release of either hydrogen ions, H+ ions, or OH ions depending upon the chemical reaction that happens. So then the positive charge or negative charge flow can be measured, or the positive charge flow or negative charge flow would let a potential difference to establish, and the potential difference is going to indicate the type of ions that are present, and the quantum of voltage potential difference that has been observed is going to indicate the amount, the strength of the reaction. Some applications of potentiometric sensors include water impurity monitoring, or ion monitoring in water impurities, or measuring various concentrations in various liquids. And the other important potentiometric sensor is called as a ion sensitive field effect transistor, where there is an analyte would be kept on a gate, and depending upon the amount of charges that are present, the threshold voltage of the MOSFET is going to vary. The change in threshold voltage results in a change in the current. The change in the current is an indication of the amount of ions that are present on the gate. So that means on the signal. The other one is called as an amperometric sensor. In amperometric sensor, what happens is that there are electrons that there is a chemical reaction that happens between a working electrode and a metal electrode, and there would be a transition of electrons passing from one electrode to the electrode, and there is an output current that is generated. The output current when measured passed through a standard resistance would give me a voltage, and that amount of voltage that is measured is an indication of the electrons that are present in the system. So the amperometric sensor, a first simple example of that is measuring the glucose, or rather most of the glucose measurement systems use glucose oxidase, or called as GO, and there is a biocatalyst or a protein, and the amount, and this the substrate is going, the glucose is going to diffuse through a membrane, and there is an enzyme layer where the glucose is converted to H2O2, and H2O2 presence is then detected, and that detection is going to, or the quantum of H2O2, because quantum of H2O2 that is detected is going to give an indication of the amount of glucose present. So what these amperometric sensors do is that depending upon the amount of glucose that is present in the blood, there is a peroxide oxidation that happens, and there would be a depending upon the concentration of the peroxide, there would be a plateau of the curve, and detection of the plateau of the curve is going to let me know the amount of glucose present in the sensor. The next technique that is used in many bio-MEM system is to separate the liquids, or separate various masses. This phenomenon is generally known as electrokinetics, which is observed more than 2 centuries back. There are called as electroosmosis, electrophoresis, then based on Joule heating, and so on and so forth. And I would be in the discussion, in the interest of time, I would be skipping, and I would be going to one example that I'm going to look up at biosensors based on magnetic field detection and using microcoils. And in this, this is a work that is done by myself and my PhD scholar for her research. What we have done is that we have combined the magnetic sensors, or the magnetic phenomenon, for detection of bioparticles. And this is a proof of concept device which can be used for lab on chip devices. And we are using what is called as a immunomagnetic assay. That means that there are magnetically labeled antibodies that react with the target of a biosensor. What is the target of a biosensor? This is an antigen of a pathogen or a toxin under detection. The principle is something like this. So we have a substrate on which antibodies are coated. and there are certain target antigens, and there are a lot of antigens, and we are, let us call, there are certain target antigens also, and these target antigens stick to the antibodies, and the other antigens are flushed out. Then there are certain magnetic beads to which the magnetic beads are made to stick onto these target antigens, and these magnetic beads are nothing but proteins that would be sticking to the uh, target antigen. We are calling that as a magnetic bead because these beads would cause in a certain signal which can be detected using some some current. And the other case is that for the proof of concept, we have used magnetic beads, where the presence of a magnetic bead by sticking to a target antigen would give me a signal. Why biosensing using magnetic phenomenon? That is so because they have increased sensitivity. There is a decreased detection limit. That means the detection limit can be very small, and we were able to integrate these sensors with my VLSI fabrication technique. Right. So our work is based on what microcoils. So there are two types of microcoils that can be seen. One is called as a planar microcoil. Planar microcoil is nothing like like an inductor, where there is a coil. It was wounded for whatever number of rounds, and then the other end is taken from the center. The other contact is taken from the sensor. They have a wide range of applications in magnetic sensors and actuators, especially on lab-on-chip applications. The other kind of planar microcoil that we have seen through MEMS is that is called as a non-spiral microcoil. The difference between these two coils is that uh, there is a spirality in this particular microcoil, and this microcoil there are no spirals. These are essentially like parallelly connected conductors. You can see that there is a short. All these ends there are shorted. So if you look up at this non-spiral coil is no less nothing other than a set of resistors which are connected in series. And the advantage of non-spiral planar microcoil is that it requires a single metallization. So that means the fabrication complexity is very much reduced. And this also, because of its series connection nature, it has a reduced process complexity, and also has a less joule heating losses. So that means these are the two attractions of the proposed planar microcoil. So then we have fabricated these microcoils. We have taken a simple silicon substrate, and the silicon substrate is because of the fact that most of the VLSI technology based fabrication still happens on silicon. So we have based on the silicon substrate, a P-side type wafer, then we have deposited oxide, and then we have deposited aluminum, and using spin resistive coat, then taking a pattern etch, we have etched the resist. Then we have done a wet etch to transfer the pattern from photoresist to aluminum. Then the photoresist was also stripped out. So as a result, we have gotten a few, we were able to fabricate the microcoil. And this fabrication is done at using INUP facility. And we have fabricated various microcoils using different dimensions, different shapes, and this particular figure tells me what these parameters are. So R1 is the distance between the center center to the first microcoil, and G is the spacing between two coils, and T is the thickness, and Rn is the outermost turn radius. So this is a micrograph of a circular geometry, and we have also fabricated in various shapes like square, tapered square, hexagon, octagon, things like to study their effects. Then what we have done is that we have electrically characterized the microcoil. We have taken a series combination of a inductor, resistor, and a capacitor. So there is a series resistance, there is a series capacitance, and there is an inductance. And what is being done is that whether the coil is modeled as a series combinations of RLC, and we have used a parametric analyzer to measure it. So what we were able to find out is that the circular has, all the coil geometries do provide an inductance in hundreds of nanohenries, and circular shape has least series resistance and of course a smaller inductance, but that much amount of inductance is good enough to use these coils. And even though larger inductance is better, the larger inductance is associated with larger series resistance can cause in more Joule effects. So then we have also characterized what is called as a inductance and fill ratio. What is fill ratio? Fill ratio is a factor defined as that we have defined as R1 by Rn, and and as we can see that as the fill ratio is small, so that means R1 and Rn are farther a bit, the coil inductance is going to be large. And these studies also have been done parallelly on simulations and modeling. So what we have done is that using COMSOL physics, because the fabrication has certain limitations that we cannot measure everything, and we cannot have lot of structure. So what we have done is that we have experimented out and we have created the coils and we have simulated the magnetic field. So what we could see is that this is a Airy function, or the magnetic field as you move away from the radius reduces as a close function to 1 by R, and also there is a peak at the edge of the coil. So that means when I go, when I look up at the magnetic field reduces as I move away from the center, and at the edge of the coil the magnetic field is going to peak, then it is going to reduce, then there is a reduction because there is a because we are moving away from. So that means that I can pattern out magnetic field based on the I can pattern out the magnetic field based on the dimensions of the coil. Then we have also made a comparison with the conventional spiral coils, and for the magnetic field distribution, what we could see is that an effective field can be obtained by having 4 turns instead of 10 turns. So that means that our coils can be used for small size devices. Then we have started experimenting on how to detect how to use these magnetic coils. One proposal that we had was induction based balance sensor, where we have 2 coils. One is called as a transmission coil 1, transmission coil 2. These are 2 concentric coils which generate magnetic field, and there is one receiving coil. So when I apply equal and opposite currents I1 between 2 equal and opposite currents, there is a region called as a magnetic cavity that is created between the transmitting coils. So that is the same figure. This is coil number 1, this is coil number 2, TX1, TX2, and there is a receiving coil. The receiving coil has only 1 turn, and the transmission and receiving TX1, TX2 have 5 turns. So what we could see is that we have modeled the mathematics. We have modeled the equation to find out that B1R minus B2R. B1R is coming because of transmission, B2R is coming because of the receiving coil. There is a certain distance from center to the coil where there is the magnetic field is 0. The magnetic field can be controlled by B1 B1 and B2 are currents through TX1 and TX2. The magnetic field can be controlled by tuning the values of B1 and B2. That means by the quantum of I1 and I2. That means I can make the magnetic cavity large or small. Now, in such a cavity, we have introduced some iron oxide microparticles with spherical in shape with a diameter. This is a stimulation of a biomedical device, because if we want to keep any biomedical reactant, there are certain ethical requirements that are required. So we wanted to have them as a proof of concept. And there are approximately 10 microparticles in a volume of 50 microliter of the material. And then then what we have done is that we have also started simulating them using finite element analysis. What we have found out is that we have observed the current in the RX coil when we are increasing the excitation input current through TX1 and TX2. When there are no microparticles, the line indicates that from finite element analysis model, and the open symbols and the symbols indicate that from the experiments. There is a change in the magnitude of the current in the RX coil. This is a current of the order of 1 nanometers, which we have taken as a noise current, and the change is about a magnitude and higher. So we can see that if the current is about 300 micrometer, like we can see that in the absence and presence of the magnetic particles, there is a change in 3 orders of magnitude, 2 to 3 orders of magnitude. So that means a nanoampere current which was present in the absence of microparticles would become a microampere current. So this signal can be used as a detection of particles. We have also analyzed this for the frequency related operations, and we have limited our frequency of operation to 10 kilohertz, because considering the biocompatibility limits, and the magnitude of input excitation current is also limited to 100 microamperes. Even though the experimentation is done, simulations and experimentations were done for 500 microamperes, but the biomedical limitation is about 100 microamperes. So that means 100 microamperes. So that means we can still see that when the excitation current is about 100 microamperes, there is a 2-order change in the signal. Then because of the presence of the noise, what we wanted to have is that in order to improve the detection limit, we have introduced what is called as a differential non-spiral microcoil sensor. In this, we have used 2 coils, or rather 3 coils. This is the outer coil, and this is these are the inner coils. These are the inner coils. So we have pad 1 and pad 2 and pad 3 and pad 4. Right? What is done? An input direct current of 100 microampere is applied to the coil 1, and the output response is measured at contact B, where and 4 and 2 are common contacts. Or I can also measure the current between 3 and 4 and apply the excitation input current between 1 and 2. And similarly, we have done our experimentation for a bridge-based sensor, where there are 4 identical coils. And one coil is called as receiving coil, one coil is called as transmitting coil, and there are 2 coils called as compensation coils. These compensation coils are named so because of in order to at balanced condition, in order to make the output of the sensor as close to 0 as possible. And the magnetic particles are the bridge is first put in the balance conditions. The magnetic particles are then put on the receiving coil, and we could also find a change in the signal. So what we have found out is that so we have seen 3 different kind of sensors: differential sensor, induction balance sensor, and bridge sensor. So the bridge-based sensor has a sensitivity of 0.05 microampere per particle, but it has a limit of detection of about 40. So I have a better sensitivity, but it requires more number of particles to detect it. So that means the zero is only going to start at 40. But when I when we look up at the induction based sensor, the limit of detection is 10 particles. And if we look at the differential based sensor, the differential based sensor has the lowest possible power consumption. So there are certain advantages and disadvantages of these proposed sensors, but the key point here is that when we compare that with the existing technologies, uh, the limit of detection is significantly improved. So when we what these studies have found out is that the number of the fabrication is simple. The proposed footprint of the sensor is similar or smaller to the existing devices, and the limit of detection of the proposed sensor is better than the existing ones. But these are the preliminary results. There is a significant amount of optimization that is required, and we have used magnetic microbeads as a biolabels instead of pathogens and toxins. But when we consider the behavior of pathogens and toxins, these pathogens and toxins have one thing in common with respect to magnetic microbeads, that they are charged in nature. So using the charge-based nature of these particles, we can use the magnetic sensing principles to detect pathogens. So when we wish to, I would like to summarize our discussion, the talk. The biomems usually contain sensors, actuators, mechanical structures, and electronics. And biomems are both diagnostic and analytical devices. Biomems is a research of microfabricated MEMS devices for biological applications, which requires combination of different sensing excitation principles to implement a biomem system. And even though we have not really discussed in, one of the important features that is going to that people are looking out is wireless power transfer, which as an important aspect of biomems or biomedical applications. And biomems is not only a interdisciplinary subject in nature, but it's extremely complex, as unification ranging from biology to engineering design. So there is a huge learning potential. Thank you.
Any questions?
Hello, it's again
Yes.
Umesh. Sir, I think you have used the differential. This one is a kind of shielding method you have used. But what about the what is that strong magnetic field? If it is nearby the strong magnetic field, how it is behaving?
Okay. In the differential method, if you look up at, just let me again reshare my screen. See, there are a few assumptions that we have made. The first assumption is that there are certain magnetic fields, but the magnetic fields are not extremely large. Right? But that is first assumption. The other assumption is that before we start the measurement, this is a balanced bridge. So even the thank you. Even the presence of external magnetic field would have affected all the magnetic coils in the same way, because these are geometrically similar, structure-wise similar, fabricated on the same substrate. So the moment I go for a bridge-based sensor, the first important aspect that we have is that we would be detecting a null, and the null is a combination from the environment. Then I would put the magnetic, then the protein or the magnetic particles would be present. So the differential measurement has an advantage, or rather the bridge and the differential measurements have an advantage that they take care of the surroundings or the ambience. Maybe this answers your question.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are audible.
Sir, actually, I just want to ask you something apart from this topic. I'm just working under this MEMS only, but the gas sensor actually I'm willing to fabricate. And can I relate the gas sensor with any biomems type of?
Yes, why not?
Sir, yes, sir. Yes.
What we are looking out is that see, biomems apparently contains where there is a field of let us say I want to detect toxic gases.
Yes, sir.
Detect a toxic gas where if a human being or a person is going to go in, is going to affect him. For example, like most of the times this happens in mines where they have to detect lot of gases.
Yes, sir.
And apparently because the ventilation and everything is pretty bad, the gases, I mean, even though it's a small quantum of gas, that would affect people.
Yes, sir.
So this is a sensor that is going to activate certain systems, I mean, to give a warning to the human being.
Okay, sir. So this part actually.
Some of the gases, when some gases will be emitted, the spoiled food and all. Even those sensors can be related with biosensors.
Yes, they are related with biosensors. Biosensors does not mean that it has to be always always used for curing. It can also be used as for some preventive measures. Good afternoon. Somebody has opened their meeting on mobile and also on laptop.
Sir, and another question, can I ask you with your permission?
Please.
Sir, actually, this gas sensors and all, they are not just related to only, or not just based on specific gases. They can be implanted in any of the location where exactly the ppm concentration or the gas concentration is high. Actually, I am looking after this New Delhi pollutants, New Delhi location, where the pollutants are very much high. So while I am selecting the the material fabrication part, time I'm not finding out exact the characteristics of the materials. So can I have that kind of suggestion from your side to access any kind of metal properties, if you have anything?
Any metal?
Yes, sir. Any material like I'm using.
Okay. See, most of the times, any sensor, we have to look up at one important aspect in my consideration. There shall be a transducing action.
Okay, sir.
Point number one. This means that whatever that I want to detect, that there should be something happening and I'll get an output. Point number one. Point number two is selectivity.
Fine.
Selectivity meaning that I might have, let us say I have a surface, for example, coated with material. Let us say I'll take a very bad example of this mats, that these glue mats where they use it for insects.
Okay.
You can have any kind of insect sticking to that, but let us say I have a mat where only cockroaches can stick.
Okay.
So likewise, if I take such a crude example, the reaction should happen. There are 2 to 3 things that one has to consider. The two things. The first one is that is my sensor going to differentiate between all the gases that are available?
Fine.
But
And
that
how do
means
we know that?
that means that, but I have to select such a chemical reaction or such an action where there is a transducing action only applicable for the gas. So this is
Fine.
what you call as the selectivity.
Okay. Okay.
Then there is called as the dynamic range.
Okay.
From what amount of minimum values that I can measure to what is the maximum value that I can measure.
Fine.
The third case is that, let us say, is this sensor process reversible? That means that, let us say, there is I'm measuring, for example, concentration of nitrogen.
Fine, sir.
It has measured, let us say, 1 to 50 units of nitrogen at this point in time. But after half an hour, the concentration of nitrogen has gone to 40 points.
Okay.
So, if the chemical reaction is not a reversible reaction, then once I measure 50, then my measurement would saturate there. I cannot get it back.
Okay.
So I need a certain material. I need a certain action where if there is there is more gas, the more gas is absorbed, and if there is less gas, then it would be emitting it back.
Fine, sir. Fine.
So my assuming that you are from electronics and communication engineering, which is also the case with earlier me, sometimes a chemistry guy can you give a very good example of which kind of chemical system is being used there.
That's why actually I asked you. I'm the man of electronics and instrumentation. So sometimes I feel difficult to choose the material according to the chemical reactions.
So the best thing
Yes,
is
sir.
that sorry if I have to.
No, sir.
We have to talk to other people, and chemistry is not our forte.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So let the person
tell.
Let the person. Your project would become very great if you can talk. If you can make the chemical guy a part.
Fine, sir. I'll do it, sir. Definitely.
And this is actually one of the major difficulties seen in the MEMS and bio-MEMS specifically.
Yes, sir.
Like this is such a huge interdisciplinary, and then the other case is that amount of the depth somebody has to go in is also too huge.
Yes, sir. Somewhere we are finding out the difficulties. Like you said. Yes, sir.
Like for example, even in electronics and communication engineering, the guy who does very good circuit design is not very good at wire communication or signal processing.
Yes.
So now, being an electronics engineer, we have 3 main fields. Even my challenge is to even cover those 3 fields.
Okay, sir.
And then if I have any bandwidth left, I'll go to chemistry or whatever that. So this is actually, and then of course you have to fabricate. Fabrication is a different beast itself. So the best thing that I would look out is that maybe you can make good friends.
Yes, sir. So this part actually I've covered so many times. This limit of detection. So can you say something about this again? I want to hear that one.
The limit of detection has two ends. You can look at as a minimum value and a maximum value that I can look up at. But essentially, the minimum limit of detection comes from the minimum value. Let us say I have a sensor, and let us call this as a 0.
Okay.
Now, what happens in a sensor is that I'm looking up at a very large value to be measured.
Fine.
For example, I'll take the Delhi pollution.
Yes, sir.
The minimum of Delhi pollution would never ever come below 100, for example.
Yes, that's for sure.
And the maximum maybe, let us say, 500.
Okay.
Now I'll take example of a village, maybe somewhere a bit far away in Delhi, where there is no pollution.
Fine.
There, the pollution might never ever exceed 50.
Okay.
Now,
yes,
when I look up at the limit of detection, when I use the limit of detection and the dynamic range of detection, in Delhi, even if my 0, the minimum value that I can detect is 50 data set of pollution.
Okay.
I don't have to bother.
Oh, achha. Okay, sir.
But when I come back to that particular village that we are looking up at, it would never cross 50. So if you use a sensor which has a, let us say, which has a limit of detection 75 and the maximum value to be 100, you will always tell that that village is polluted.
Oh.
So my limit of detection is the minimum value that I'm going to do.
Okay, so that part or that location where the minimum detection can be done, that part I can take it as a limit of detection, and I can go up to maximum up to some extent.
Yes, but there is also a limitation on the maximum dynamic range. You cannot have everything from 0 to infinite.
Yes, sir.
So,
thank you so much, sir.
So once you look up at, and the other condition that comes in is that when you are looking up at limit of detection, that means that you have very small parts per million or billion. So that means that your maybe your sensor should be accurate enough to measure those.
Yes, sir.
So that means the structure of the sensor might be a bit slightly different.
Yes, sir.
Or the surface area might be large, whatever that you may say.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
I think all the contacts even in the mail as well, it is being posted in the web. I request you all to contact him. Sir has worked in NIT also. He has got experience in speed. If you're very interested in this, you can contact him through emails. Over to Bhagya Lakshmi.
Madam, it seems there is one more question.
Yes, sir. Sir, I want to know about fabrication.
May I request you to please speak loudly because I am not able. You are not audible.
Sir, I want to know the fabrication of surface acoustic wave devices on silicon substrate.
Sir, your voice is not audible, sir. Ravi, sir, your voice is not audible.
Yes, ma'am. So I want to know about fabrication of surface acoustic wave devices on silicon substrate.
Fabrication of
Surface acoustic devices.
Wave devices on silicon substrate.
Sir, I have to say sorry here because I have never worked on surface acoustic devices.
Okay.
But one thing that I may help you out is that if you could give me certain literature, then I can say what is the possible process to way to process it on silicon. That I may help you. But to be frank, I have never ever read on surface acoustic devices. But
the next speaker will be talking on acoustics.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you, ma'am. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver this vote of thanks for this session. On behalf of the HOD and the faculty members of EIE department, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Ramar Komargiri, sir, Department of ECE, Bennett University, for sharing his valuable inputs and research findings on biomens, finite element method simulation and design constraints. Thank you very much, sir, for sparing your valuable time with us. The next session will start at 2 p.m. after lunch. Thank you.
So thank you very much, sir.